Thanks for joining us today. My name is Brett. I'm one of the technical directors here at Densify. This is a Densify webcast on the path to continuous cloud optimization, where we're going to take you through some recent research that Steve and I did with a few of our customers around their experiences with optimization and the value they've received along the way. It's a little bit different for a webcast from us in the sense that you're going to be hearing a lot less about the product and more about customers' experiences and people and process and culture kinds of things. So it's a really interesting set of material. Hope you enjoy it. The session is going to be recorded and will be available for replay afterwards. We've got 30 minutes today where Stephen Geist from our TAM team is going to take us through the content. I'll be watching the chat window for questions, so feel free if you've got a question to pop it in there, and we'll take those questions toward the end of the session today. With that, I think we're going to start it off with a poll. There's one question. So folks want to check out the poll. Do you have a formalized infrastructure optimization program at your company? Yes or no? And I think, Steve, this was an interesting observation just overall from the customers we interviewed, in the sense that companies that are really prioritizing optimization have formalized how people interact, how they're organized, and how they're incented. Cool. So some yes, some no, but 57% say yes. That's good to see. It is a very good predictor of success in driving an optimization program. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Steve to take us through the content.
Okay, thank you, Brett. And thanks everyone for joining. So what are the benefits of an optimization program? That's really why we're here today. There's three key benefits. First, it builds motivation. So it gives you visibility to information you previously didn't have available in a whole new context. And it gives you the ammunition to make better decisions and have intelligent conversations with this heightened awareness. It also fosters trust. This is about building confidence with your app dev teams. It enables the ability to change how they make infrastructure decisions today, and it provides the proof or the empirical evidence to show what the benefit of the change is. And then last benefit is that it improves control. So what this does is it gives the ability to introduce these new changes and have them driven through some existing change management channels or workflows that you have within your organization. There's also some key elements that go along with it for an optimization program to be successful. The first one is having the people, or having a set of people involved. And what's important here is how they're organized, incented to optimize, how they communicate across teams, and defining the criteria for new information, new technical information, I should say. The other key element is having a process, and that is leveraging the new technical information that they receive into cross-team cadence meetings. These meetings are typically held weekly, monthly, and cover the state of the infrastructure, starting where optimization program perhaps started, and then celebrating the success or the progress so far, and often making call outs to those individuals that have made success. And then the last key element is leveraging technology. So this is about leveraging the information feeds or existing tools that are in use by your organization today, and having the new information fed out and then advocated across tools, and advocating next for change.
That was a really interesting thing that I observed in our interviews, Steve, was how the data often brings people together. Data visibility in particular, right? When you start to surface some of the information about how people are making decisions about what infrastructure to use, where to deploy, how to deploy, it's a really good motivator for companies if they're looking to, build or drive an optimization program or prioritize it in the context of the rest of the priorities and projects that are going on in a company. If you can see that data and get it in the right hands of people that can do something with it, it's really powerful.
The three customer case studies that we've assembled, we've nicknamed them by the overall theme that we came across for these customers. So the first one is the what we nicknamed the one-man show. And this company is a major digital solutions provider. They have a cloud-first mandate. They're one of AWS's largest customers. heavy use case in auto scaling groups and ECS and Kubernetes platforms. They've developed a very mature cost reporting management system, and their mandate has expanded from pure cost optimization to resource optimization. The next case that we'll also review is what we've called the optimization team. This is a private cloud-focused global logistics company, and their team ensures that environments have enough resources to handle peak seasonal business cycles. What the problem that they've identified is that this has led to over-provisioning, resulting in capacity shortages and long deployment backlogs. So by providing a proof of concept to their executive team, they got the permission to dedicate a group of individuals to focus on reclaiming idle resources by each application owner or business unit. The last case study is the managed service provider, and this provider has a trusted level partnership with their customer, and customer is a large cloud-focused telecommunications company. The customer recognized that the costs were out of control, but they didn't have the resources or the technical expertise to really affect change. So they turned to their trusted advisor, the partner, and they are running the program for them and have had tremendous success.
So a good learning is that there's no one size fits all for an optimization program. All three were productive and successful in a lot of different ways.
So let's start with the one-man show, and let's look at what their motivators were. So what they did is they created their own efficiency metric to align with business objectives and key results to motivate their teams. And what this concept was essentially was to assign an efficiency value that from Densify, when we saw this, we were so impressed by it that we actually added it as a feature in our product with their permission, of course. They also were highly financially driven. They had a requirement. They've established a requirement for their application teams to participate in this optimization program in order for them to qualify for their team budget. So there was high motivation to have teams take action. And then the third key motivator was gamification, and that was used to recognize and celebrate efficiency gain scores for teams who showed ongoing success every month. And this has continued to inspire collaboration and also help the teams feel like the value that their contribution was being valued and called out company-wide.
That gamification shouldn't be understated, right? There's so many people that look at optimization as a potentially punitive thing against people in terms of how they make decisions or potentially wasted budget allocations by asking for too much or using too much. So if you can turn it around and make it a benefit for people to make different kinds of decisions or use different methods for making decisions and celebrate their progress, it really is a game changer organizationally in terms of culture and how people look at this kind of program. This is a really good example of
that. The next key thing for them was establishing trust. So what they came up with was their own actionable criteria. So recommendations that were fed from Densify were curated, and then using actionable criteria, they vetted the recommendations and then socialized them to the engineers so that only the types of recommendations that were, quote, actionable would be sent to engineers so that it would allow them to be very efficient and not spend too much time away from their day-to-day job or impacting their deployment cycles. They started small in a UAT environment, and then as success continued, they expanded adoption into production, and it's continued to lead to company-wide interest. For controls, they established a process for preparing recommendations and then having them socialized to relevant app owners. And they established a monthly cadence to produce these recommendations. And then in between the monthly emails, they would then communicate with these teams in scope to answer questions, provide education, and work with the app owners to execute the changes. The people involved were the title was the Optimization Technical Coordinator. As the nickname shows, this was comprised of a single full-time employee who was dedicated to driving the program and had the sponsorship and overriding power from their CIO. The individual's mission was to ensure the company's provisioning and initializing resources in the cloud in a cost and performance efficient way. In the other thing that he alluded to was that their main task was shifting engineering behavior and really being able to convince the engineering teams the reason for the change, what their participation was critical for. The process that they used was by taking the recommendations, breaking them down and filtering them by engineering or app dev teams. Then they would then prioritize each recommendation by the top 5 cost savings. And the recommendations were then fed or sent by monthly emails using a predefined template. The emails themselves contained embedded links so that app owners could easily self-serve the recommendations just by clicking on some links in the email. And the recommendations themselves were applied by these engineering teams, not by the technical coordinator. The technical coordinator his purpose was to provide the recommendations and then education on where maybe there was pushback. If there was any significant pushback or recommendations were being ignored, then there was a process in place for the technical coordinator to escalate it to the CIO if there was a need for top-down push to get recommendations actioned. The technology they used was a homegrown dashboard. So it was really a culmination of feeds from different applications, including Densify, and then combine those into a single pane of glass for a high-level view. This dashboard is available to executives as well as regular employees, and it also included metadata for identifying who the business owners for the applications were, and it also ensured that the technical coordinator was contacting the right people, so that if employees had changed positions or new ones came aboard, it made sure that the recommendations were going to the right people and they weren't just being e-blasted and not viewed. So our next case study is the optimization team. Their primary motivator was to create a proof of concept led by their capacity management team, who provided awareness to the executives to explain why the company was struggling with resource availability. And what came out of that, or the observation by the executives, was seeing the size of the prize led to an executive mandate and the establishment of a dedicated team or a reclaim team to focus specifically on resources that appear to be idle, looking at over the last 13 months of their utilization history.
I was really surprised when we talked to this customer, Steve, about how huge the visibility factor was for being a catalyst for change, and then resulting in a very short time frame, a massive cost takeout for these guys.
Yes, and the efficiency metrics that they settled on that really captured eyeballs, so to speak, was they came up with a cost value per physical host, and then a number of standard VM sizes that would fit in a given host, factoring in operation costs, software, all those things, and then tracking week over week the number of VMs reclaimed, would show both a cumulative and a weekly progress of effort to show where savings has been found. After the POC was completed and the team was established, they expanded into UAT and then gradually into production environments. The program has been so successful that in 2021, the team received an internal award The criteria for this award is executive level management teams nominate individuals that are making a significant impact in decision making, and as they came across in their weekly meetings any resistance, they would provide education as required to these application owners and provide additional evidence as required. And for the establishing of control, as the team expanded in size, they were able to build a process by coming up with a weekly cadence and assembling a list of recommendations that are fed from multiple sources, as well as the contacts for these resources, so that they would only contact the teams or the individuals that were in scope. And this would also be used for checking changes and contacting and following up with teams that hadn't responded or were showing some resistance. The team themselves nicknamed themselves the Reclaim team, and it was a group of 6 users. And their success has exceeded everyone's expectations. Since the program began in 2019, they've consistently exceeded annual targets. Their process consisted of preparing a worksheet based on multiple feeds, and systems were then grouped by their respective app owner and prioritized by highest reclaim opportunity, or what they call the worst offenders. And using an email template similar to the last case study, they would include artifacts such as utilization trends and focus mainly on peak seasonal business cycles, which they have many, to prove to the engineering or app owner teams that even during the business cycles, the busy business cycles, that these systems are essentially idle and could be terminated or consolidated. And then in the process that they used, they included hyperlinks, just like the first use case, so that app owners could go to their own self-serve portals and apply the changes themselves. The technology that they used was business intelligence reporting or dashboards, using feeds from Densify as well as other configuration item data. And this, again, just like the first use case, ensured accurate distribution of recommendations. And then reclaims themselves, once they were grouped together and sent out to teams, they were tracked using a Kanban board system. And it allowed them to create a queue of new requests so that they could reach out to additional app owners at a later time. Our last case study is the managed service provider, and how they built motivation. Their customer was exceeding their cloud budget annually, but they really lacked the insight and didn't understand why. They recognized the problem, but they just didn't have the skills or the time to fix it. So they turned to their managed service provider, who was already considered a trusted partner and had the necessary resources to put together and manage the program. The partner's goal was to focus on cloud efficiency. They consider cost optimization a byproduct of increased inefficiency and not necessarily the focus. And the efficiency metric that they used was the number of systems in an optimized state. The trust was achieved through a proof of concept. So it provided the initial visibility into the executives on what the total potential savings were across the board. Then the next thing they did is they started to look at what would be the short-term targets, so for the next 12 months, and what scope of systems they would focus on. So they had chosen development and non-prod environments first, and then also started working on a long-term goal over the next 5 years to expand that process and work on the production environments as well. They also have a very strong tagging governance, and this is the critical source of truth for identifying the applications that are in scope for optimization, as well as the people who are responsible for those systems, as well as ensuring that that the governance was applied properly to those systems. They established a cadence of teams, and that consisted of weekly with their senior stakeholders, monthly, focused really on improving their process, and then quarterly with their CIO and head of infrastructure to review what's progress had been achieved, are they in alignment with their annual targets, and any potential roadblocks that need to be discussed. Control was established by defining clear roles and boundaries between the partner and the customer's scope of responsibilities. So a clear line was drawn to allow the managed service provider full access to the non-prod environments. In fact, what made their experience unique is that they were basically given the approval to apply the changes without the need to even contact the application owners themselves. And we asked them why, and the response from one of their senior stakeholders was they found it was better to ask forgiveness than to ask for permission, which really translated to it was easier to roll back changes rather than trying to push for a net new change. And this also led to increased cooperation from app teams who wanted to be involved in the change process, and it definitely impacted their motivation. But for production environments, it's a little more traditional. Partners didn't have the same level of control, but what they did do was they prepared the recommendations. They were distributed to the app owner teams to advocate for change, and then the app owners would make the changes themselves so that they could apply it during the next change cycle. The people of the program started with the program leader, who managed the executive communication and coordination of the program. Then they had their environment or platform management team. This was the customers themselves. They had a management business objective to reduce costs, so they were motivated internally to cooperate with the managed service provider to have a cost takeout target. And then lastly, there was the CIO, who was there for pushback and for escalation optimization requests that were refused. The process that they used included a tracking system, and this allowed stakeholders to see the progress of their sponsorship and allowed them to socialize and drive expansion of efforts across production as well, and showed the month-over-month savings as well as the cumulative savings since the program started. They had also established in non-production a set of tools that the partner could use to apply the changes themselves and not have to rely on the engineers to make the changes. It's led to a much quicker turnaround in terms of being able to action the reclaims. Within production, it's a little bit different. The recommendations go into a service desk ticketing system, and as applications were upgraded, then developers would apply the changes at their leisure. So going from a few days in non-production, in production, it was more like 3 to 4 weeks. And really, what they're looking at doing long term is having a workflow that will be automated instead of manual. By using automation, this will be able to then push those recommendations into their next releases and allow them to take action a lot quicker in a more DevOps type of pipeline. The other thing that was really key to the technology was their public tagging governance. So what this was used for, in addition to identifying owners of applications, it also allowed Densify to synchronize or allocate enough resources for their systems that were part of a disaster recovery group or part of an active-active cluster pair. And it also allowed us to align the recommendations to only consider the ones that their vendors require. So in some cases, their vendors would only allow certain instance types. So we then customize the types of recommendations that could be actioned for those types of for those specific vendors or specific applications. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you found these concepts interesting and insightful. And considering all these case studies, are there any examples from your success that you could potentially use in your program? We're hoping that you can, and we're here to help you with developing or enhancing your programs by consulting with our team anytime.
Awesome. So the great news is we've introduced an offering called ICO, Intel Cloud Optimizer, to provide customers with that immediate visibility into what is the opportunity for optimization in the company. In conjunction with Intel, basically they're sponsoring the program, the usage of Densify under the ICO program for qualifying customers for a year. And then customers get access to Densify Core Analytics for that year. During the time, there's also assistance from Intel, no additional cost, which is awesome. They've got, something like 7,000 developers that we can bring to bear on a company to look at things like performance, engine tuning, infrastructure selection, lots of great things that those folks can dig into with customers. Which is great, wonderful partnership. And it's just a great no-risk way to, like I said, size the potential savings opportunity that you have against your infrastructure. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining today. And Steve, thanks so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone.